right, welcome to the Moynihan Report on the Two-Way Network. I am your host, Michael Moynihan. I am not in the studio again. We're building a new studio, by the way. It's going to be bigger and it's going to be better. But it was also like oppressively hot in New York City, so I had to leave the city. And I also had to leave the city like the final Vietnamese person hanging off a chopper in 1975 because it was apparently just taken over by a member of the Communist Party. We're going to talk about that. But I'm very, very excited. Why am I excited? Well, I'm always kind of excited, but I'm especially excited today because as I was saying to him before we started, Ethan Strauss, you might know him if you ever listen to the Fifth Column, the other podcast I do. He's a frequent guest on the Fifth Column. But Ethan Strauss, he has a new podcast. Is it a new podcast? I think we're going to get to that. It's a new podcast called Random Offense, which is here on the Two-Way Network, and it's Fridays, I guess, at 4 o'clock Eastern time. Is that right? Just once a week. But so we have a new podcast. Then there's the House of Strauss, and there's a million other things. So Ethan Strauss, who I have variously described as the nicest person in this space, this being the kind of podcast universe, and some other things too, but I won't tell them about some of your more controversial views, Ethan. I know you're always like measuring people's heads and calipers. What is that's a very weird thing that you have. But Ethan, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
It's just called scouting in sports. That's completely fine. That's part of the business. There's nothing wrong with that. Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about. And if I say anything that any of you guys hate, I'm just a dumb sports writer. That's my plausible deniability. I can't be expected to know stuff.
Wait. Hold on. Let me make sure that you out there in Moynihan Report land don't believe this bullshit. And the reason I don't believe this bullshit is because Ethan Strauss texted me not long ago, probably about 6 months ago, and he said he was reading Whittaker Chambers' Witness and had heard me say that I really liked the book. This is a book from the 1950s that Ethan was devouring. So if he says he only knows about sports, I call bullshit on that. But Ethan, on the sports thing, I said something. I mean, we have so much, you said we're not going to talk about. It was so much material. We talked for 2 seconds before we started, and we already came upon something that we have to talk about. I said that, maybe post-game interviews are kind of bullshit, right? This is everyone makes a joke about this. Like, we played hard. We played a good game. They were a great opponent, but, we triumphed. And it's like, okay, this on repeat. I said this, Ethan Strauss jumps in, Mr. Sportsman, former ESPN man, written a book about the Golden State Warriors, knows all this stuff, says that's wrong. They are useful. Ethan, very quickly make the case for me why I am wrong that post-game interviews, which always sound so dumb, are actually useful.
Yeah, you're completely wrong about this, as are many people, and I can't blame them because occasionally they'll tune in to one of these post-game interviews, and it's almost like you're conflating if you were to visit a factory and they've got some sort of slurry before it becomes a delicious candy and you go, oh, that's disgusting. I hate this. This is useless. The point of all of these questions and these really boring settings, and I've not liked having to be in these press conferences. It's not enjoyable. You get a few nuggets, you get useful things that you connect to a broader story and you learn about the athletes. Klay Thompson, for instance, out here, formerly of the Golden State Warriors, much loved out here, never wanted to do a single interview. He never wanted to do a post-game interviews. He hated talking to the media. He was unusual in that respect because if a guy scores 40 points, he'll want to talk to the media at that point. Even then, he would try to sneak out. Eventually, he became this quirky, beloved character with malapropisms and weird, spacey things that he said, stoner things that he said. And it was all in these interviews that he never wanted to do, where the questions you could characterize as stupid or basic. And that became the thread by which people came to know him. And so a lot comes out of these interviews. We get to know people. The process sucks. I understand that people will see the process and go, why do we have that? We shouldn't have that. This is boring. But eventually, and I'm struggling to come up with the new media terms for it, it's not, that isn't the product. The product is being cured from it. It's being curated from it. The thing itself before that product, I get why people hate it, but it's still a necessary evil.
Yeah, so this is an important part of sports that people tend to overlook, and maybe I overthink it. But the personalities are a huge part of it. I mean, the fact that there's stories, and this is why I think, by the way, this is my hot take. You ready for my Ethan
Yeah.
Strauss? You ready for my sports hot take? This is going to be a smoking hot take. I think that the way we're treating the WNBA is quite sexist. And you want to know
Explain.
why? Yeah. I mean, it's not sexy to quote Spinal Tap, but it's just that the only time you hear about it is when the ladies are fighting. That's the
Mm.
I don't hear about anything of the actual basketball playing. I just like I why do I know who Angel Reese is? And I don't really pay attention to the NBA, much less the WNBA. And it's because she's fighting with Caitlin Clark. And then there's another lady, I think her name is Cunningham, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of pictures of her that are very provocative. So I think that's probably sexist too. I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah.
sexism means. I'm just saying that. But but she came to her defense, and I was like, oh, this is like the Real Housewives of basketball. That's literally
Oh,
that. It's the drama. That's what everyone's paying attention to.
I okay. So first of all, I just like that we can speak freely
Yeah,
here
we're speaking for this.
because
Nobody's watching. Don't worry about it.
well, okay. I mean, that's part of why we can speak freely. But I read an article in a legacy publication recently about, oh my God, Sophie Cunningham's social media followers have exploded. They've just gone up by so much. And the entire time you're reading the article, there's no mention of the hot blonde elephant in the room.
Yes, yes.
There's this fear from the straight male journalists that I can't just say what's happening here and I just have to act like it's a mystery that everybody's
Yeah.
tuning in and trying to follow this woman on Instagram. And who knows? It's really interesting. What is really interesting?
She could be shooting free throws underhand. I have like like just the like in the fourth grade. I have no idea because no one cares because it's not about the basketball. And if you're not going to point it out, because I think people want to pretend that the WNBA is catching on because people like watching the basketball. I don't think that that's necessarily true. And I know that I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
How
But
dare
the Cunningham, I don't. Is she a good basketball player? I just know
you?
she's
No,
hot. She's
okay.
hot. That's it.
She's a role player. Here's what's interesting about Cunningham and why I've stopped worrying and learned to love the WNBA and just embraced it for all its catty drama.
Mhm.
There's a magnetism. You can't avoid it. And this is a perfect example. The Cunningham thing. My feed froze a little bit. Can anybody
That's
hear me?
my feed for it too.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
don't
Well,
need to
okay.
see as
Okay.
long as they hear us. They don't need to see us.
As long as they hear
We're
us.
not Cunninghams.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
Moynahans and Strausses.
So this is, I think, a good example of why you just can't resist the WNBA.
Yeah.
I tried. I even said I'm going to avoid talking about this league. And Caitlin Clark got bashed as she frequently does. She's hurt now.
Hmm.
And Sophie Cunningham, a role player, we've established why many people are interested in her. She took the woman who bashed Caitlin Clark and got her in something of a Mai Tai headlock
Yeah.
as revenge. And the WNBA presented us with the situation of, look, there's going to be a Rick Mahorn type figure who will raise up and defend Caitlin Clark from all these batterings. It's going to be the most attractive blonde model looking woman in the league. That's going to be
Mhm.
the Charles Oakley. That's going to be the enforcer. How can you resist a league like
You
that, Michael?
can't. You cannot resist. Do you think they called her and were like, "You're the hottest. Can you also be the toughest? We need you to be like like the hot Bill Lambier, or something like that." But it's working out in that sense. But I tried to watch a few of the games, and I just got to be honest. I couldn't get into it. I tried, but I couldn't get into it. So because the other things, I feel like they're forcing it on me. I feel like people want me to
Mm.
like this, and they're like, it's like eating your vegetables in a way. It's like you don't be sexist, like the WNBA. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try. I mean, I have one child and I have a daughter, and she is an incredible athlete, like a very, very talented athlete. So yeah, I mean, I'll watch that. And I just couldn't get into it. So that's just my WNBA take is exactly like everybody else's, and I'm sorry that it's so tedious and boring, but there you go.
It's not tedious. It's not boring. That was their slogan, by the way, was the eat your vegetables. The Nike slogan for the WNBA is the only thing wrong with the WNBA is that you're not watching it. It was scoldy in that way. And
Wow, is that true?
that is true. That was the slogan. And what's
Man.
interesting, Michael, is that they are becoming more popular, but like a monkey's paw Faustian situation, just not in the way they want, and they hate it. That's what's interesting, that they resent the most popular player in the league
Yeah.
and really refuse to acknowledge that she has bequeathed all this to them. And that to me is fascinating, that it is popular but doesn't want to be, and it's against the way it wanted it to go. So I can't stay away. There's just too much going on, too many threads.
Yeah. But are any of them related to basketball though?
No, no, not at all. That'd be ridiculous. No, thank you. I don't need that.
That's amazing.
No.
Yeah, we already have a basketball league. We're good. But keep fighting, ladies. No, I'm sorry. That's a joke, please. All right. Well, I wanted to get some sports in there. I mean, we're gonna get back to some sports. But you're like a basketball guy. I can't talk about like the NHL with you. You don't care about that stuff, do you?
I don't.
Yeah.
There wasn't there a line in West Wing that somebody was saying, I remember, I couldn't help but feel that all the goals were accidental.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's kind of true. But well, so I want to talk about this, and we were texting about this earlier. You live in Oakland-ish, right? You
Yeah.
live kind of up the hill from Oakland because if you lived in Oakland proper, you'd be mentally ill because it's a totally failed city, right? It seems, I mean, last time I was there, I was like, I just took a right into like the worst place I couldn't believe it. It
Yeah.
was like a third world country. I guess we're not supposed to say it anymore. So I'm saying a lot of things you're not allowed to say anymore. So it was part of the global South, I think is
Yeah.
what I'm supposed to say now. So you've seen and you're well aware, particularly as adjacent as you are to San Francisco too, cities that have failed, right? And I think San Francisco, it's fair to say, is kind of a failed city, and it used to be one of the most glorious cities in America, and it's just a very different city now. New York just had its Democratic mayoral primary. And to be clear, this was the primary, not the election. So we can see what happens. Eric Adams, who would be the Democratic incumbent, was basically became a bit Trumpy just for the fact that he was about to be thrown in jail for being a stooge of the Turkish government or something. It's not even clear. It's just like he's obviously Eric
If I
Adams
had a
is,
nickel for every time I heard that, Michael, that's just a classic
yeah.
American story right
Well, he's also just a terrible politician and like just not. He had the great thing when he was asked on I think New York One on the local cable news, sell New York, and he said. This is actually true. He said, look, you never know what's going to happen in New York. You could wake up and it could be a 9/11, or you could be, and I was like, wait a second, did he just pitch it as planes flying into buildings in massive terror attacks as being a positive about New York? He did indeed. And he's a terrible politician. So he might run. There's a little slot for him. Cuomo, it looks like, is not going to run. But it was this idea that Cuomo Adams would run separately against Fidel Castro, who has won the primary.
now.
So, why is this important? Well, I think it's important beyond New York because New York is the kind of economic engine of the world. It is, as New York goes, so many other places go too. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this because it really, you don't even have to make provide the explanation of why it is a international story, not even a national story, because it's just proving that that is the case because everyone is talking about it. I mean, every news broadcast, every newspaper, every Twitter account. I mean, these are people talking about the UK and Europe. Do you think it's a harbinger of anything? Because so many Democrats, particularly Democrats on the kind of DSA socialist fringe of the Democratic Party, are making the argument that this is where the party should go next time around. No more old white guys. And I believe that is something that was said by somebody said this morning. No more old white guys like Joe Biden. And what we need now is young, dynamic, left-leaning, radical, non-white. I mean, we've seen this, but that is a mysterious argument to me. But this is what people are saying. What is your takeaway from the Democratic primary?
I like that briefly froze with my face in skepticism. Yeah, that was the problem with Joe Biden is he was white. That was
Yeah,
the
yeah,
that was
that was
the
definitely. Yeah, that was
That was the problem.
100% the problem.
Okay, so yeah, I hate indulging New York's main character status, but I do think it's a meaningful result, even if it is a Democratic primary.
Mhm.
And I think that it's meaningful because it shows where the party's going. I don't think it necessarily presages where the electorate in total is going or what the
Yeah.
moderate voter wants. This is a Democratic primary, but I look at the boomer hold on politics writ large, and specifically in that party. And you saw a bit of it with the No Kings protests. Those were very geriatric protests. And that's just the lib boomer cohort is big. But to quote Herb Stein's economic rule, if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. And this looked like the start of it hitting the wall.
Mhm.
And I think there's this big divergence right now between boomer liberalism, which I think is fairly moderate and patriotic, and whatever it's going to give way to. And so to me, even if you could say New York is a specific case, this looked like the giving way to. And even if New York is different, I do think this is the future. And partially it's the future because what's stopping it? What's the countervailing force to stop the movement towards the sorts of things that Zohran was talking about? I don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the countervailing force for people like Zoran Mamdani is reality. I mean, that's essentially it's going to butt up against reality when one has to pay for all these programs. One is going to see capital flight, despite the fact that Mamdani says, well, if these people move out of New York and they're still doing some business in New York, we're going to find them and tax them. Either way, we're going to hunt you down and make sure to separate you from your money. But I mean, we essentially have two parties now. If this were to be the future of the Democratic Party, we essentially would have two parties that are in the grip of voodoo economics,
Mm,
of stupid economics that every economist knows doesn't work, and that's tariffing your way to budget surpluses, tariffing your way to prosperity, to factories coming home, and unfortunately, I think a lot of this is tied up to COVID. And everyone I talked to about this, I said this to somebody, I think on the show. Yeah, I think it was on the show. Maybe it was Brace Belden, a very, very fun, funny, smart Marxist guy who did the thing that conservatives do and said, yeah, experts. You trust experts, like you trust economists. Every economist says that wage and price controls are bad and rent control is bad. It's like, you believe that? I'm not doing justice to his argument, but
yeah.
it's a capsule version of an argument you hear quite frequently, is that because experts got things wrong, now keeping in mind that what they got wrong during COVID was a brand new infection that nobody could figure out what it was, where it came from, and how it replicated. So
Mm,
yeah, so they're going to get some stuff wrong. But there are people that are throwing out the playbook of economics, which, on the far left, they say, oh, it's just this neoliberal playbook, right? It's neoliberalism. And that's a failed policy. I beg to differ with that, by the way, and so does, again, reality. But this is going to be the problem for MAGA going forward, is that when the jobs don't come back home, when prices do rise, when things are not solved by sort of, they're essentially progressive economics on the right, that people are going to be like, okay, so we tried that. And I think the same thing is going to be true in New York City because Mamdani is going to be up against reality and a lot of people in the Democratic Party, which they typically say, oh, he got overwhelmed by the swamp. He was swallowed by the swamp, right? These people, they become part of the swamp. It's like, no, they actually come across reality and realize that some of their most mystical plans, the stuff that you come up with in bull sessions in your dorm room at night, this utopian ideas, they're not easy to implement, much less when you do implement them do they succeed? Of course not. They never do. But you also have entrenched interests that you have to deal with. That's the reality of politics. But when you're Zoran Mamdani and you're 33 years old, you say, oh, they're all screwing you. They're all getting together and to screw us. It's like, no, you're going to be the mayor if you are the mayor. And you're going to have to keep all of these coalitions together. Like he lost the black vote by a lot, right? I mean, that was the one that Cuomo walked away with. He was basically for rich white people that live in Park Slope. So
Mm,
how do you keep that coalition together? Well, you have to make deals. You have to make concessions. And that is what these utopian candidates say is like being eaten up by the swamp or swallowed by the swamp or compromised by the deep state. But it's also just reality most of the time.
yeah, it's funny. There's that whole Taco Trump meme of Trump always
Yeah.
chickens out. And I think to myself, that's one of the things that I'm actually happy that he does. So when people who hate
It's
Trump
exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
when people who hate Trump make that accusation, it almost feels like such terrible food and such small portions where don't you want him to chicken out of the
Yeah.
crazy thing he's going to do? I mean, thank God. He's such a strange person that he has the impulse to do something insane, but then when it butts up against reality, he's insane enough to do it, but somehow sane enough when it starts not working to go, oh, never mind. Oh, yeah, bad.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
to back off that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the same thing's going to happen with Zohran if he does win. Uh, and I also just don't know how much he's going to exercise his power. I know it's a strong mayor that you got out there in New York. I will say, I don't think his coalition is merely, from what I can see in the numbers, the rich hipster whiteys and whatnot, although that's part of it. He did target the South Asian community, a very slick campaign. And it seems like he has done well with certain cohorts. And I guess we might be privy to a Royal Rumble similar to the WNBA and their entertaining fighting. I can't wait, Michael. If I step back and I'm glib enough to pretend that this doesn't impact people's lives, watching the blacks and Jews versus the white hipsters and the South Asians, these
Yeah.
proxy battles with the
Yeah.
incoming, if it is Adams versus Zohran, I mean, I that sounds very entertaining at least.
Well, I mean, let's not sleep on Curtis Sliwa, the
Oh
great
yeah,
Curtis
he's
Sliwa,
great.
the founder of the Guardian Angels. Who, and by the way, I actually really like Curtis Sliwa, and I don't even I don't know his policies, but I just find him an amazingly entertaining and very New York character. And he would be we have to vote for him because he would be the last New York character who has a New York accent. Acts like that, talks like that, walks around the subway with a fucking beret on,
Yeah.
like trying to save people. That doesn't exist much anymore. But no, I think most of that is right. And people voters are very easily gulled by politicians saying we're going to give you things. We're going to give you. Nobody wants to know where it comes from, and particularly when you go on, the Breakfast Club, which I think was this morning
Hmm.
that Zoran went on the Breakfast Club and was talking about all the taxes he's going to throw upon the gilded class in New York, and that's just going to bring in all this cash, and then we'll spend it on poor people. There's never any sense that there's any ricochets from taking money from rich people who are already funding most of the government of New York. Right. He also doesn't seem to understand that he's going to have the legislature in Albany that he has to deal with because you can't just magically set all this policy without the state actually agreeing to some of it. And that's sort of boring of which one's which. But I think that it's kind of crazy for people to not see and pretend not to see the knock-on effects of this stuff. Right. I mean, it's incredible to watch people with tariffs. I mean, this is the exact same thing when they say, well, yeah, all this money comes in and then people have to buy it home and then they'll buy it home and then American factories go through the roof and everything's great. It's like, yeah, but do you understand how much of that stuff is both exported that people make in America and imported input costs of it? And then people don't think about this stuff. The same thing is true when it comes to levying enormous, like onerous taxes on the wealthy, and it's like they can pay their fair share. It's like somebody has to finally define for me what fair share means because a lot of these people are paying a lot of money in taxes. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes. But I think that it's the knock-on effects of just trying to say we're gonna punish Wall Street and we're gonna punish the rich people. They will leave, and he says, well, no, we'll find them. Nope,
Yeah.
they will leave. They will leave. Particularly Wall Street, where there's no anchor. It's not like you have a brick and mortar shop. You can get up
No.
and go to Miami, and Miami
It's going to be
welcomes you.
Berlin. They're going to shoot people who try to cross.
Yes, that'd be great if they put up a wall, like a wall around
Yeah.
a wall around the boroughs. But
I
yeah, so I
think
think it's a bad moment for New York, I would say.
I think a lot of people just assume that these things aren't going to actually turn into anything bad, that there's almost a metaphorical lifeguard that if something goes wrong, will jump in the pool to fish you out if you do something crazy. And they operate that way. I also think people don't necessarily see a connection between their vote and policy all the time, which is logical in a way when you think about it. One vote doesn't matter. That's not what you're supposed to say, but it is true. So I think people do sometimes just cast a vote because it's fun. And it's
Mhm.
not actually, this is what I want to see in the world. It's just me kind of drafting off vibes, as it were. So, yeah, I don't know. It just sometimes people do things because it's fun or because Cuomo is a terrible politician and he had demonstrated already that he can do a bad job. I'm just fascinated from the outside of it. If you want to hear a sports writer from the Bay Area tell you all about New York politics, maybe I'm not an expert, but I'm just looking at the data and the precinct data and the voting. And I do look at they've done a big thing. The whatever we want to call this brand of the left, the AOC
Yeah.
left, whatever. It's a big thing, but it's not all of the things. And there are all these conclusions people are drawing right now as though we're not looking at votes cast with a Democratic primary voter screen. And so we're being told all these things
Yeah, it's
that
a
people
closed
want.
primary, so people know you
Yeah.
have to be a registered Democrat in New York to vote in the primary. And it's a primary, not usually a big turnout election. If for Democrats, and what we're talking about, the future of the party and the future of America, is at the end of the day 400,000 votes in New
Yeah.
York City.
And they got a big turnout. It's a big thing, but I'm just watching people draw these conclusions and going, "Oh my God, Mamdani, he did well in Staten Island, even though he didn't lose by that much, even though we were told that this would just be too radical for people in Staten Island." Michael, do you know what Trump won Staten Island by? Maybe Richmond County. Do you know?
I don't know offhand.
I
Uh,
was surprised by this. I knew he won it.
yeah.
He won it by 29%.
That's what it was in that. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
You are not
no,
getting representative Staten Islanders in a Democratic
no,
mayoral primary.
that was the
And
greatest thing when I saw there was like a live stream from the Zohran party, and there was somebody like making that point, like, can you believe it? We're winning at that point. We're winning Staten Island. It's like, yeah, there's 48 votes.
yeah,
There's like 48 Democrats, and you got like 20 of them. So,
yeah. It was
like,
about 25. I think it was literally about 25,000, which
yeah,
Staten Island is just roughly under 500,000 people.
yeah,
So look,
the forgotten borough.
it's one of these things where I think they've done a big thing. I think it presages the future in many ways, the future of the Democratic Party. I wouldn't dismiss it as meaningless, but we're drawing a lot of these conclusions with a bit of a blinder, and people are going, "Oh, we heard that him being against the gifted schools was going to hurt him with Asian voters, but look, he did well in Chinatown." And I go, "Okay, well, that precinct voted 60% for Donald Trump." I don't know. Like, we're looking at this. I guess what I'm saying is we're looking at this without wondering if some of these blocks have just fled to the Republican Party or outside the Democratic tent when we're reacting to this. I think
That's
with
right.
Jewish voters, especially, I think Jewish voters are lurching just very quickly to the right. And I don't think it's captured by the polling. I think it's hard
Yeah,
to poll
yeah.
people on a thing like that. Not every cohort, especially Hasidic, is going to be easy to pull.
Yeah.
And we've got
I mean,
the,
it's also why, Trump voters have been undercounted, and people have pointed this out for a very long time. They're undercounted in polling because there's, the reluctant Trump voter, that this is the thing, that people that don't want to be honest about the fact that they're Trump voters. And that is also not captured in polls. But I think that one of the things that we're about to see is we had a lot of conversation in the political universe about this abundance Democrat thing that was happening in Ezra Klein
mm,
and Derek Thompson from The Atlantic. And they're essentially making, free market arguments in a lot of ways, in a lot of ways not too, but saying things like, oh, we need affordable housing. We need to build more. And to build more, we need to get rid of regulations. We have a lot of bad and stupid regulations. Let's get rid of them. So I was quite happy to see that Ezra Klein, who has been the kind of lodestar for a lot of young Democrats for a long time. I mean, he has a very popular podcast at the New York Times. But then you realize that the internecine fight of the Republican Party is now going to be replicated on the left too, because it is the AOCs, it is the squad people that do capture the attention of young people who know nothing about politics and nothing about the world and believe you can make everything free and everything's just hunky dory, because those who don't want to make something free are just mean and selfish and Scrooge McDucks. So they don't have any practical experience with this stuff. And when Zohran Mamdani says we're going to have state-run, city-run grocery stores, which is the most deranged thing that I could possibly imagine, particularly when you realize that the grocery stores in Manhattan are expensive because the real estate prices are expensive and they operate on about a 1 to 2% margin. That's they're ripping people off at the 1 to 2% margin. This is insane. And so we're going to have state-run grocery stores. Who's had those before? This is
Yeah.
we want some bread lines now. So that battle from people who are more on the free market end but want a welfare state, want regulation but want the bad regulations in their estimation gone. That's the Ezra Kleins of the world versus the AOC types and the Squad types and the Mamdani types. Whereas, the Republican Party is having this with the traditional free market types versus the people who are like kind of the most Mamdani people on the right. They're the Bannons of the world who want to see a bigger state and want to see a bigger welfare state. This is not the two parties of the 1990s. These were two parties in the 1990s who were very solid in what
Yeah.
they believed. The kind of Clinton New Democrats, you had New Labor in the UK. The Republican Party was going to be the party of free markets and sort of pockets of religious conservatism, pockets of libertarianism, but it was pretty much settled. And this was the post Cold War moment where everything felt kind of settled. And now it's like you have civil wars on both sides. And both sides, the dominant factor now seems to be the ones that have the absolute dumbest economic policies.
Yeah,
So
I don't know
it's a
if
bit
we got civil
off-putting.
wars, Michael. I think the wars might be settled. I think the
Yeah.
wars might be won.
Yeah, I
If
think you might be
not
right.
today, then I mean, you saw everybody bend the knee after he won
Yeah. Yeah.
leadership in the Senate. I know Gillibrand spoke out against him, so maybe there are some holdouts in the older guard, but Schumer effectively endorsed
Oh,
him.
yeah. He had that tweet. It was embarrassing.
So and Klein isn't a politician. I think he's doing that thing that intellectuals do because these politicians, by and large, don't have their own ideas. They all use some nerd's ideas to implement, and
Yeah.
so he is going to be generating ideas and hoping that whoever is in power is going to implement an abundance thing, which is a just traditional, like
Mhm.
Michael Anton was doing for Trump or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's AOC's party. I do think that's not just some sort of conservative pejorative term. That's just where it's headed. They're afraid to speak against her. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that the power of social media fame is intimidating. It's intimidating to some of these older people. And Mamdani was great at harnessing that and ran a very slick campaign. And I think we're just watching it. We're watching it change. We're watching the Democratic Party change in many ways on Israel specifically, which
Hmm.
it's bizarre that the city of New York's position on the nation of Israel was such a topic, but it was, and that's
Hmm.
meaningful. And back in the day, as a Democrat, you wouldn't have to reconcile support for Israel against being a Democrat or feeling at home in that coalition at all.
No, no,
Not when I was a kid, but now
no.
that's a thing. And so
No,
that's
I
also
mean,
happening.
yeah, remember Norman Podhoretz, the kind of king neocon from back in the day. He wrote a book, one of the last books, he's still alive. One of the last books he wrote was probably about 15 years ago. It was it was called Why Are Jews Liberal? And
Mm.
that was just like, why do Jews vote in a block? The old joke is, they was it
It was
they
called
earn.
it was called My Jewish Problem and Yours.
Yeah,
I think was the
yeah, in yours. The old joke was that they earn like Presbyterians and vote like Puerto Ricans, and that was always a mystery. And that coalition seems to be kind of breaking down in a way with so many Jewish
yeah.
voters saying, "I don't think I have a home in this party," particularly because I mean, New York is of course has the largest Jewish population of any city outside Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, outside of Israel, we should say. And we literally had the leading candidate. At that point, we didn't know he was the leading candidate, but I think this actually helped him, to be honest, with the
Yeah.
coalition of Park Slope people, where he said globalize the Intifada in the same way people used to say, jihad just means struggle. It's just
Mm.
about like, yeah, I got to just do a jihad this morning. It's like, I got to go jihad and pick up the kids. It's like, no, 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 we know what you're talking about. And this is like globalize the Intifada. He's like, that's just, we don't. I mean, he could have so easily dodged that question when he was on the Bulwarks podcast of all podcasts. with Tim Miller, he could have just said, look, it has nothing to do with what we're doing here in New York. I
Yeah.
don't legislate. I don't have no power over the Middle East. But he took it because there is a kind of global idea about these people and
Yeah.
this kind of ideology. It's like, whereas the Trump people say, oh, the globalists, the globalists. I mean, these are people that care very narrowly about foreign policy. They didn't care when 500,000 people died in the Syrian civil war. They didn't care when there was mass starvation in Yemen during the Yemeni civil war. They do care about this one issue of Israel, though. So I think that was actually helpful to him because, as you pointed out, there's a narrow band of voters, Democratic voters, and the people that come out on primaries are more radical. They just are. This is what we
Mm.
understood about Trump: is that the
Yeah.
more radical people in the primaries, then you have to tack to the center in the general. There's some truth to that. I think that's kind of been blown up in a few ways, but yeah, these are radicals. I just don't know how long they are for the actual democratic experiment. I don't know how long they're going to be around for it.
Well, I think there's this tricky conversation about it. I do think the changing demographics make for a less pro-Israel situation in many of these cities. There's all this discussion about whether TikTok is seeding anti-Israel hate or
Yeah.
anti-Semitism. And I look at it without the ability to look under the hood of TikTok and understand it. And I just go, it's a global platform. People from around the world, outside of a few countries, can participate. And around the world, Jews are far less popular and Israel is far less popular than within the United States. So if the platform
Mhm.
is global, you're going to see more of that. That's just what it is. And if the demographics of New York City become less Jewish and draw off more of these places where Israel is not, let's say, so loved, then you're going to see that reflected in what is successful electorally as a message. I do think, again, that some of the lefties who are loving this result and say it's the future, there might be a little bit of overreading the result within their own coalition and not enough worry because even if the demographics are shifting, as you said, the most Jewish people in a city outside of Israel, I do think that that's something you should at least wonder about or worry about when it comes to electoral results in the future, especially because even if Jews are not large in number in the United States, they are going to tip elections in a few different places. And again, I don't have the polling. I don't think we have good polling on this. We don't have good polling on how much Jews are shifting to the Republican Party, but we do have results that are suggestive. Where were the
Mhm.
biggest shifts in the 2024 election, Michael? They were in Florida, New York, and New Jersey. Those are the
Mhm.
biggest shifts to Trump. So I don't need survey data to necessarily see that that's where things are headed, combined with just anecdotally knowing a lot of Jewish people, this is shifting in that direction. So
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by those dynamics, and I think that there's a lot of glibness right now on the lefty side that you can just regard Israel and talk about it in this very pejorative way that you would never apply to any other country, and do so in a dog whistly way and everything else. And that's fine. And we got this result. And that means that there's not going to be anything bad that comes of it. And laughing at anybody who would suggest that anything bad will come of it. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit early to say that.
Yeah, I commend listeners to go listen to the last episode of this show. And if you haven't already, what is wrong with you? Like, what do you have things to do? Go back and
Come on.
listen to the one from on Tuesday that I did with the great Israeli journalist, very well-connected Israeli journalist Haviv Rettigur, one of the smartest guys out there. And we ended up talking about this too. And it was on that sort of TikTok thing. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Is that when Vietnam was over, 15 years after, 20 years after, PBS did a show, a documentary called Vietnam: The Television War. And there was conservatives, by the way, were mad about this, and PBS gave them a spot to do a counter documentary, which was voiced and hosted by Charlton Heston. But the television war that was the whole thing. It was the first televised war, and that's how people turned against it and how they got very, very exercised about these things. Yeah, sure. But this is actually the first war that is a social media war in the sense that all of those images in the past were filtered. And they were filtered for good taste, for respect of families. And that no longer exists. And this does not help the Israeli cause. in the fact that anytime a building is hit and collapses on civilians, there are people there with cameras and they're uploading it within minutes. And so I don't blame them. As Haviv said, I agree with Haviv that I don't blame these young kids who don't know anything about anything. They have no sense. They think this is a uniquely destructive war and uniquely deadly war. I mean, it's not even as deadly as the war in Ukraine. I mean, but it is, to their mind, a genocide, right? And nobody cares about the meaning of that word. They just say it's a genocide. And that is motivating so many of these people. And, you know, when you saw the Mamdani parties and the people going out and actually campaigning for him, the number of keffiyehs you saw was like, you know, more, it was unbelievable. It was like wearing a Yankee hat. Like everybody had a keffiyeh on. And it's like, oh, this is the uniform now, because that is just part. And this is very bad for Israel, as the Israelis understand. And it's going to kind of shape the coalition of Democrats and Republicans, because as you pointed out, like in other countries, the opinion of Israel prior to October 7th was exceptionally low. It always has been, right? America has not been the case. And it also blows up this idea of America being controlled by Israeli foreign policy, in the sense that that's not true, because Americans do appreciate Israel, always have. And that's why so many people vote on behalf of Israel, because their constituents want it, because their constituents support Israel too. It's a kind of a tricky thing where people think that, you know, they're filling the void and giving us all this propaganda and buying. You know, this is from people from the right, the Tucker right. These people saying that, you know, Netanyahu wins another one. That's why we bomb, because of Netanyahu strong arm. But it seems like the opposite is actually true. That Trump is doing a little strong arming of Netanyahu. But you wanted to about Tucker. You're a huge fan, right?
Hey, we're from the same neighborhood.
Really?
Unlike you, actual friend of Tucker Carlson, who has seen him a lot. I had one phone conversation with him where back in the day he seemed loaded. I don't judge, but that was my experience of it. I'm fascinated by the Tucker right disavowing the Trump administration over this Iran-Israel issue specifically, because I'm fascinated by social media. I'm fascinated by my belief that so much of the political currents in our lives are medium dictated. And I don't have conspiracy theories about the Jews running everything, but I do have a conspiratorial mindset, perhaps, of just whatever massive social media platform, whoever controls it, is going to tilt the political conversation in a certain direction. And so I just thought it was so underrated crazy, Michael, that they flipped out so much about the strike on Iran and the strike on the nuclear facility, because it was almost as though this hadn't happened before, as though there hadn't been a Trump one.
Yeah.
I mean, he hit the Middle East back then. He
He
hit
killed
Soleimani back then.
the head of the IRGC.
Yeah, he killed the shadow commander back then.
That's amazing.
That all
Yeah.
happened. So there are all these
Yeah.
people going, this isn't what I voted for. And it's just, well, it happened before, so I don't understand. And Trump said again and again that Iran can't get nuclear weapons. And the only reason I think it became such an animating issue, I think, and this is a tricky thing, this is a fraught thing to really sift through. I think that when Elon Musk bought Twitter in 2022, a lot of different things happened at once. I think that I'm broadly supportive of how the medium became less censored, but then all kinds of conversations happened. And there was more of this Israel fixation, anti-Jew fixation, the
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
you see from Daryl Cooper, the greatest historian of all time, or whatever the
Yeah.
branding is, where he's talking about the evil Jewish Yahweh and all the problems that it's wreaking across the world. And so I think there was a feedback loop, and I think certain people on the right started getting that kind of feedback, and that was informing what they felt they should be fired up about. And then suddenly they were reacting to what looked like normal Donald Trump foreign policy, something
Yeah.
that they probably wouldn't have cared that much about in the past. When Soleimani was killed, there wasn't this kind of defection or freak out. And I think the different medium and the different conversations on it caused these people who might have been seen as just dyed-in-the-wool Trump loyalists, your Candace Owens. I
Yeah.
think that's part, like, that different conversation caused them to react and say, this is a bridge too far, even though it was the obvious bridge that would have always existed. It was, they had movement. They had movement because the medium changed and the conversations they were a part of and the feedback from fans and audience that they were getting, that's what changed. That's just my guess.
I think that's an exceptionally good point. And I think that that's something that the number of people who are now extremely anti-war, anti-interventionist, Pat Buchanan's, like mini Pat Buchanan's, that if they're old enough and go back, they all supported the Iraq War. They were all the people that were at Fox, including Tucker, but I give Tucker a tiny bit of credit here, is that he got off the Iraq War bandwagon pretty quickly. So I'll give him that credit. And, he went to the Cato Institute. Now he thinks that libertarians are the greatest evil that has ever been wrought on America. But there was, of course, the Cato Institute was like an anti-interventionist place, still is. But this stuff with Ukraine was what really tipped me off. The fact that so many people have so much like bileless hatred for both Zelensky and the Ukrainians who were invaded and being murdered en masse by their revanchist and horrible authoritarian, not even authoritarian, dictatorial neighbor. It seems like to me that we always knew what side of that fight we were on. The Russians were the bad guys because they had always been acting like the bad guys. But when I saw so many people line up behind the anti-Ukraine cause, I realized that, okay, so Donald Trump has moved the party, but it's very easy to move parties, right? If you're all, if it was George Bush, people play team politics. They would get on board with George Bush, right? The number of people like Charlie Kirk, I'm not even going to say the bad words about Charlie Kirk, but he's a big somebody who's a nobody, right? He has no thoughts, no ideas. He's not a William F. Buckley of his generation. He doesn't, he's just a guy that rah-rahs for his team. Was on, as you were saying, he was on that bandwagon. He was like, this is what we say now. No intervention. We are anti-interventionists as a party now. And he was saying that. And then he said the other day, Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize. How quickly these things go. It's you get whiplash trying to pay attention to people's positions on this. But the Republican Party has not come to the kind of anti-interventionist point by reflection. It's in an almost culty way, because you see after Donald Trump's, launches this very limited attack on targets in Iran, the number of Republicans who supported this was like 70 to 80%. Yeah. It's like how many? So the Dave Smith coalition is what? 20%? Less than, yeah. I mean, that's an ultimate Twitter is not real life, because the Republican Party loves the military. And when the military is being deployed and Donald Trump is doing it, they're going to support the military. They're not going to be like, I think this is a really bad idea. So that's when I can give Tucker Carlson credit. Because Tucker Carlson is, he's not saying, well, this is my president, do or die, ride or die, I'm going to get behind him. He did not. And I was wondering, with a lot of people, there are people like Steve Bannon's of the world that did not get behind him. But a lot of others who would have been like, America's got to stay out of the Middle Eastern wars, and Donald Trump never started any new wars, et cetera. They flipped pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's all true. There's something in this, though. I'm glad you brought up the Ukraine thing. I'm going to try to coin a phrase. It never works for me. None of my coinages.
You can't declare it. That's not how it works.
Is that what I'm doing wrong?
No, yeah, it's got to be good. It's just got to be good.
God damn it. Well, okay. I'm going to call it moral inertia. That's what I'm going for. I'm trying to call my shot.
Okay, call your shot, Babe Ruth.
Okay. Yeah. Ukraine, I think what happens is that people start with a non-interventionist position. That's defensible in my opinion. And in many ways,
of course.
I'm non-interventionist. I think it's totally reasonable for somebody to say, hey, I don't like what Russia is doing to Ukraine, but I don't believe it's the purview of the United States to be involved. And I don't think tax money should go to that. But people apparently don't work that way, Michael. I think what happens is they start with that position, and then there's this moral inertia to further justify that position. And it doesn't feel good enough to just go, look, maybe Russia's bad, but it's not our job, and that's my position. It starts to turn into this other position of, are we sure that Ukraine isn't bad here? Are we sure that Russia...
Are we the baddies? Yeah.
Yeah. Are we sure Russia isn't good here? Have you seen their grocery stores? Have you seen those grocery stores? And similar with Israel, where there's this defensible position of, look, the Middle East is crazy. We shouldn't be involved in this. It puts a target on our back. A lot of people hate Israel around the world. This is their battle to fight. They've got nuclear weapons. We shouldn't be involved. But then it turns into, are we sure that they're not evil and they're not trying to control us and our politics? And
Mhm.
are you sure? I mean, maybe Hamas has got some points. There's this inertia where it doesn't just stay. It doesn't just stick on non-intervention and non-participation. I wish it would. I wish people would do that more often of, look, I am principled about this. I don't think that we should get involved, but they just feel a compulsion to add more and more
Yeah, yeah,
justification
yeah.
for not getting involved. And that becomes more and more justification for the side that looks worse in the fight, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tale as old as time. And you look at in the 20th century. 20th century is littered. I mean, the bookshelf behind me is probably 50% books about people turning against their own country. Paul Hollander, the great historian, who's written quite a bit about this, of that people in search of other paradises, and a great book called Political Pilgrims. They're going pilgrimages all across the world. If it's not going to be the Soviet Union, it's going to be Cuba. If it's not going to be Cuba, it's going to be Venezuela. If it's not going to be Venezuela, it's going to be Vietnam. They keep doing this sort of thing because I think, to your point, that people are very simple. The complexity of saying, because the point that you make, it is absolutely a defensible point. I don't agree with it, but that's me. It's a defensible point to say the United States should not be giving any weapons to the government of Ukraine. You shouldn't do it. That's fine. And as you point out, that people have to go a step further because there's tribalism involved, and there's also this sense that there has to be good guys and bad guys, right?
Yeah.
So Zelensky has to be the bad guy if and Putin has to be the good guy. They can't possibly. It's why you have so many people in cafes out on the street protesting who never had a word to say about the Assad regime, which was, I mean, what would we say, 50 times more murderous than what the IDF was doing in its operations in Gaza? Not a word. You care about the Middle East, you care about Muslims, you care about, oh, no, you care about, the good guys and the bad guys when it comes to your country, right? So you have to get on the other side of these things. You couldn't just say, America shouldn't be in Vietnam. You had to say, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is going to win. That's a different vibe, right? And then I used to call this, to add to your coinages, I used to call this the Michael Moynihan free breakfast idea of politics, which was that you could do whatever you want as long as you gave people free breakfast. And that was the truth. That was the truth of the Black Panthers. It just like murder people. There was essentially a criminal gang. There were Stalinists. There were self-identified Stalinists. But they gave breakfast to some people once in a while. So we can fully embrace them. You can't just say like I embrace some of the ideas. That obviously racism is bad and it's been this original sin in America. It's like no, we have to go all in for everything. And to see that, and I think Tucker Carlson is the best example of this. To say, oh, you call me a Putin apologist. It's like, well, no, and as a matter of fact, I am. Because I don't know what else. I mean, you've either never
You're
been
in
to
the grocery store, dude.
correct. You're looking at Stalinist murals. They're like, look at how beautiful these subway stations are, which, by the way, were built in the 1950s with slave labor, for the record, just so people know that.
But to be fair, there is a point at which I would have defended him against that charge. And I would have said, that's not fair to say about him at that point. But this is the coinage I did that actually worked. I might have lied. I did have a coinage that resonated, as one of the people in the chat said, called criticism capture, where people become captured by what their critics say about them. And what some people do, they almost mirror the criticism and become the criticism. I think at a certain point, that would have been an unfair criticism of Tucker Carlson. But he hears a bunch of that criticism and one thing leads to another. And he's in the grocery store telling you about what a utopia Russia is. And that's just another thing that happens where people either fight desperately to not be the caricature, or something in them goes, maybe I am the caricature and fuck you. And I'm going to be it to the fullest extent. And I don't even, I'm even trying to hit that mark that you've made for me. So that's this other social media dynamic.
Yeah. Look, and it's also to take things that are not nearly as good as what you have and elevate them above what you have. So it's very, very difficult for young Americans to realize that they live in the most prosperous time in human history, in the safest place to be a human and to be prosperous and to be whoever you want. And that is not good enough for people. The people that are out there saying capitalism must be destroyed and are asking ChatGPT the best way to destroy it. I mean,
Oh,
I mean, there's some things, there's some cognitive dissonance here that we don't like accepting. If you have, if your girlfriend just broke up with you, if your parents are assholes, if you didn't get into the college you want to get into, and you start having this adversarial mindset, you're going to dismiss everything that is good about your life and everything that is good about the society you live in and start hunting for something better. I
well,
mean, this is what you have in the mayoral election. Like, what a horrible place New York is to live. It's unaffordable, but yet it's 9, 10 million people, including undocumented immigrants, that are racing there to live that lifestyle and to live that life.
Well, I think it's easy to sneer at that impulse, but people are bereft of a deep need. And I don't think we're wired to actually live in the modern world. I'm thankful we live in it. I'm thankful. I watch a movie like Saving Private Ryan and go, oh my God, I'm so happy. That's not too long ago that you might have a realistic expectations that your entrails might be visible to you on a beach because
Yeah,
you had
yeah,
to go
yeah,
to war. And
yeah,
that's just what happened to young men for a long time. But
yeah.
there's this wiring in you to be part of an epic. People want to be part of an epic. They don't want to be living life. They don't want to have a drab life of absolutely no meaning. They want that passion. And you're hearing some of this commentary from people who are pro Israel, who visit Israel and relay these things about, yeah, it's so terrible in many ways, but the people are so connected. And you have these acts of bravery from young soldiers and it's bonding. And it's this tricky thing. It's this problem where we almost want life to be worse at some level so we have more meaning within it. The town
Mhm.
I live in, this is a weird place to take it. The town I live in is haunted by a sword of Damocles of fire. It is, I can't even tell you how much it permeates every aspect of this town. And when you drive in, there's this fire risk of the day. Everybody talks about it. It's so much of the policy of the town that we're all worried because we're extreme fire risk. And it's the happiest town I've ever lived in.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
is. And maybe it's not connected, but it feels connected. It really does. It feels connected that we have this existential threat hanging over us and that binds us, it bonds us. And so I think when you have people who they might have certain deprivations of life, but they're by and large comfortable and life isn't very life isn't very high stakes, they're going to seek out a high stakes situation and they're going to maybe even enact it in this parasocial way and just try to get the heat of it. And I think that's especially true for young people. I think that there's a search for meaning. I think there's an absence of meaning in the modern world, and that's part of the rejection of the comforts. It's not just ignorance of the comforts, it's also that the comforts aren't doing something that we're wired for.
Yeah, there's more to life than this. There must be. Yeah, and unfortunately, that is, I think, one of the most dangerous instincts to have. People tend to think that that is something that's clarifying, that is
Mm.
motivating. I think it is what leads us to revolution, and
Yeah.
revolution always ends in a bad place. I mean, almost not always, but almost always, is that modern. You can't see a lot of modern revolutions that ended well. All right, I'm going to take a question here because I just realized we're up against time. Ethan Strauss, we have these. See, you say, what are we going to talk about? And it's like we just talk. This you and I just talk like we're just sitting at a bar,
I love it.
and that's what I hope that you, our dear listeners, love this too. But I'm going to go to Josh, who is out there in the universe. Josh, where are you? I'm trying to figure that out.
Oh, New York.
You're in New York. That's what I was thinking. What do you got to say, Josh?
So I don't normally participate in internet conversations, so this is certainly a strange thing, and it's weird to be talking to Michael Moynihan, who I originally watched on Vice way back when. So this is a great honor. But when you guys talk about the lack of connection, Vox just did a video, and I know I'm quoting a Vox video, but they just did a crisis on EMS. I volunteer as EMS.
We're losing Josh.
Yeah, it's
Josh,
not a utopia. The technology fails us
that
sometimes. I
people,
want revolution.
oh
hold
no,
on
am
one
I
second,
lagging
Josh.
really bad?
Yeah, you're lagging really bad because I think Zohran has taken over the internet in New York, and now it's public utility and it doesn't work. So
Right. Well, I
you
think
you
what I
said
was trying to get,
yeah, you said there was something about about EMS, right? Or the band
yeah, there's a
EMF.
huge,
I don't know.
No, EMS, emergency services. So EMTs are huge lack in EMS services, huge wait times for 911 response systems. And there's not enough young people to volunteer their time to be an EMT. But I think that's because there's a lack of community. And that's why
Mm,
people gravitate towards democratic socialism or these other movements where there's a crisis
yeah.
of meaning. And that's why you see, like you said, about Israel, where yes, there's difficulty, there's adversity, but then there's also that sense of purpose and community. So how would you say we could foster more sense of community in the American culture where, you had back in the day, small towns, everyone would go to the firehouse, be a volunteer fire person, and you would have that sense of community. And now they're talking about, well, we'll pay people, we'll try to build it. But that's, I think the problem with that is that you're then you're not really going to the root cause of which is lack of community, lack of feeling even proud to be an American. As you were saying, we don't want to fight anybody's wars because who are we? Well,
Mhm.
if we feel that there's certain sense of pride and privilege, then we have a responsibility to try to help other people, whether that's
Yeah.
volunteering or trying to help other people outside of the world, outside of the broader world. I guess
Yeah.
that's where I was, coming from.
I think it's a great comment, Josh. I think it's very smart. And one of the things, before I kick this to Ethan, um, that you would see in New York City in the past, I mean, not necessarily in the recent past, but in the past 100 years, is there was so much community that was based on ethnicity.
Mm,
People came from Italy and they all lived in Italian neighborhoods because there was a common language and common customs and traditions, and everyone knew each other. And this is true of my family, is it was all ethnically based. But it wasn't, life wasn't ethnically driven, but like neighborhoods were. And so that's what you have, particularly in cities. I mean, you see, obviously, in the suburbs, it's a totally different thing, as you point out. I mean, smaller towns, you go to the Midwest, go to the South, go to the Northeast, even to places in Connecticut, Massachusetts, et cetera. And you do have pretty good communities. But I think that it's right also that there's a fracturing of that because of technology. And
yeah.
I'm kind of bullish and positive on technology. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is when I went to Europe when I was young, and my daughter is 14, and she's gone to Europe a bunch of times. Her mother, she has an EU passport, so um, and what she experiences is everything that is people with accents who have the exact same opinions and cultural reference points that she does, which is
Mm,
incredible to me. Whereas when I went to England when I was young, I was like, what is this stuff? What are these television shows? Who are these bands? Like these newspapers. I used to go and buy a stack of newspapers at the newsagent because it was so exciting. There's all this stuff that I was unfamiliar with. But that is like, even in a community sense, this kind of, you know, those kind of community customs and traditions that you see amongst, by the way, amongst like Jewish communities, which have maintained because of thousands of years of this and having to be on guard against the ever-present anti-Semitism, in which is why people are, going from Russia to in Germany to ultimately to Israel, is that you have to have that defense and you have to have that community. It's a kind of a forced thing. Whereas now, I mean, I just see that there's a lack of, local things. Like my daughter's like really obsessed with my Italian grandmother, and she's like, "Oh
mm,
my God, where is she from? What is it?" Because everyone's kind of the same. Like her best friend is black, Japanese, Jewish, and it's like not any of her identity in a lot of ways. They're just friends. It's not a thing. They all live in the same place, and so they all listen to the same music. She went to a Taylor Swift concert in London. It's like it's all this kind of one, like indistinguishable.
yeah.
That's fine, by the way. That is totally fine. But the
I don't
old
think you think it's
ideas.
fine. I think
Well,
you're
I just
mournful about
yeah.
it.
Well, I am mournful for
You
sure.
you were talking about how Sliwa is going to have the last New York
I
accent. I
love
think
it. But Ethan, do you know what I think of? Like honestly, half
mm,
the books that are in this house behind me, I found at bookstores because I just happened upon them, and I was like, "Oh, that
mm,
looks good." Whereas if I want a book now, I just order it, and it comes the next day. Looking
Yeah.
through the stacks of records, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, all the guys in De La Soul and these guys used to sample breakbeats. They're like, no, they go to the record store and they just pull out records. They're like, this Ohio Players record looks interesting. I can't sample it. I don't know. I can't sample it, meaning I can't listen to it immediately. I don't know what it is. And I'm just going to buy it. And that stuff, it's so much easier now and kind of so much better. I have more access to knowledge than I've ever had. But you kind of want to, in some ways, you miss the kind of adventure of finding things.
Mm.
And I think the community, not to get too far afield from the original question, but I think the community thing is kind of flattened by the fact that everybody from Zagreb to the Upper West Side listens to the exact same music and
Yeah.
watches basketball and wears like NBA jerseys and stuff. And all the players are from Zagreb now too. So
Yeah. I don't know how to fix it, to the question from
or
Josh.
should it be fixed? Should it be fixed?
We need a giant virtual video game war that everybody, it used to be sports, but that's becoming less popular. Maybe this is a sports topic I can introduce. Only 15% of Generation Alpha, that's the incoming teenage generation, in surveys say that they watch sports or do so regularly. So even that source of community is falling by the wayside. And in this world where everybody has on-demand entertainment and their own niche gets catered to, we're losing this kind of connectivity. The hunger is there for it, but it just can't be generated for whatever reason. I don't know how we're going to get there.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about sports before we go, and unfortunately for all of you, I could do this for 7 hours, and I don't want to do this like Rashomon episode where Ethan and I are just talking about weird stuff. But the one thing that I see, because Josh made a point about patriotism, and that's a kind of a weird nebulous thing that definitionally is kind of hard. But why is it that I love the World Cup so much when I don't know anything about soccer? It's because my daughter and I like root for the US, and then when they inevitably get kicked out, we get on the Swedes if the Swedes are in there and find these familial ethnic connections to get really excited about, right? And it's like you're supporting your country, and it's like this country battle, and you know nothing about the sport. You're like, wait a second, why was that offsides? I don't understand. But then I'm like, foaming at the mouth, screaming at like, kill the Brits or something. But that thing is like, that's the most patriotic you get these days is the World Cup. So I love that's the marriage of patriotism and sports, which I just, the same thing is true. We were just watching the World Hockey Championships, which we're going at the same time as the NHL playoffs. And it was like we were watching the US and Sweden every time. My daughter has a Swedish passport. And so we were like very bullish on that stuff. But yeah, it's like, that's not a community. My daughter doesn't even speak Swedish, despite the fact that she has a Swedish passport and her mother's Swedish. But she is like, I'm a Swede. Because I think one of and I'll leave it on this, but because this is like the French goodbye of all French goodbyes. But
I know, I got a live stream with Katie Herzog tomorrow at 4 Eastern. I think we should be like the way people are up all night playing poker.
We should just do it.
We should just talk until we get to that point tomorrow on Friday.
Like a dance-a-thon. What was it? We just keep going. But this is why, and I'll say this is why, to Josh's point about the fracturing of community, this is why people loved identity politics so much. When it was given to somebody that you are a thing, you are a black LGBT, like they're like, what do they say all the time? My community, and as Christopher Hitchens said, if somebody in a question and answer period starts with as a, just turn your brain off because it's not going to be good. But the thing is, when people would say like our community, there's no, what community? You're from Cleveland and this person's from Baltimore. And but we're all LGBTQ. It's like, that was like the instant, it was like, creating sea monkeys in a glass. It was your instant colony of your people who have nothing in common beyond that characteristic that you just gave yourself. It might be true, but it doesn't mean anything. There's a million ways to be black. There's a million ways to be Hispanic. There's a million ways to be Jewish. And that kind of thing of like, that was what we did for community. Yeah. It was like, we're a community now. No, you're not. Sorry to say.
No, that's this whole other topic of the branding of community that isn't really a community as the blank community. I do think there is something called the Black community. There is a diaspora. There is a Black culture. You referenced the Breakfast Club
Oh,
earlier, and
Camille would be so mad at you.
I know he
I'm not gonna tell him.
disagrees.
He'd go nuts on you.
He would go nuts, but when you say the Breakfast Club, I was amused because I was thinking that people might think that that's some fancy donor thing. The Breakfast Club, but really,
Yeah.
it's the most
Or
popular.
an Ali Sheedy movie. But nobody's thinking that. So,
It was really the most popular Black radio program or whatever we're calling
with
it,
Charlemagne the God,
which is why he's there, which is why Mamdani's there, because he's trying to make
Correct.
that overture. I think that's a community in a way, even if 40 million people can't possibly know each other. But then you see these other exotic brandings of communities that just aren't communities. And is it really a community if these people don't share that much in common? I don't think so. I think the town I live in is a community where people actually know each other.
Yeah. This is a community. It's the 2A community. Ethan is now part of
Right.
it. And you got to pay attention to Ethan because, even if you don't know, this is a good thing about Strauss. If you don't care about sports, he'll either make you care about it or talk about something else too. So it's not like when you turn on ESPN, no one's going to start talking about Iran in the Shah. In 1953, like now they're just going to talk about sports. You get a lot more than just sports with Ethan. So go check out Random Offense, which is his new show on the 2A network. And thank you guys for joining us. But subscribe. This is the thing you got to do. So go to YouTube, whatever, Spotify, Apple. What is it? Where do they get this stuff? Is that right? My producer says Quibi and Rhapsody, which I don't know if those exist anymore. But if you can get it on Quibi, that'd be great. But either way, keep listening, keep watching, subscribe. And we will see you probably back in the studio next Tuesday. Bye.